Hey guys, this is Josh. In this video, we'll be comparing Nikon's recently released P1000 and Sony's magnificent RX10 Mark IV. The reasonable place to begin is actually going to be with the price point, right? We're going to work fairly systematically through these and through their offerings into their value propositions. So, starting off, the Nikon P1000 comes in at $1,000. The RX10 Mark IV at $1,700. So that's a pretty big difference. That's, 1.7 times the P1000 in terms of the Sony RX10. Moving on to the next most significant element of these quote-unquote bridge cameras, the Nikon has a 24 to 3000 equivalent lens, the Sony a 24 to 600 equivalent lens. Now the Nikon's is going to be f2.8 to 8, and the Sony's is going to be f2.4 to 4. The ISO range on the P1000 is 100 to 6400. The ISO range on the RX10 Mark IV is 100 to 12,800. On the P1000, you can shoot 7 FPS for 7 frames, so you get 1 second of 7 frames per second. On the Sony RX10, you're going to get 24 frames per second for 249 frames. So that's 10 and change seconds of continuous high-speed shooting. On the P1000, you're going to get 4K 30 and 1080p 60. And on the RX10, you're going to get 4K 30 and up to, it's not a great quality, but you can get up to 1080p 960. The P1000 weighs in at 1.42 kilograms or 1,420 grams. That's the better part of 3 pounds and change. Now the RX10 comes in at just over 1 kilo, so that's going to be 2.3-ish pounds. You're going to get like 66% of an inch or 1 centimeter close focus distance on the P1000. You're going to get 3 centimeter or about 2-inch close focus distance on the RX10 Mark IV. The P1000 has a 1/2 inch type sensor, so it's not actually 1/2.3 inch. That's just the name of the type of sensor. And that's going to be a 16 megapixel sensor. The P1000 has a 16 megapixel 1/2.3 inch type sensor. That's going to be about the same size as a smartphone or the sensor in a GoPro. And the RX10 Mark IV has a 20 megapixel 1-inch type sensor. They both have a 2.36 million dot OLED EVF, so that's a very nice EVF on both of them. And they both have pretty good stabilization in their lenses. If you're interested in either of these two cameras, you'll be able to find affiliate links in the description, Amazon affiliate links. Those won't cost you anything extra and will just help me out a little bit. And if you're so inclined, please go ahead and smash that like button. Think about subscribing if you're not already. I appreciate it. Thank you. Now I'd love to dive into the sensor specs with you because this is going to be a pretty big point of differentiation, almost as big as that lens reach. P1000 has less than 25% of the total surface area as the Sony does in terms of sensor size, and the Sony sensor is of course at that point then 4.4 times larger than the P1000 sensor. So let's kind of dive into where these really break apart. Some of these are obvious, right? The sensor, very different sensor. They're both backside illuminated, but the RX10 Mark IV's is stacked, so you're going to get really great ISO performance. You're seeing that even with that extended range. My Rebel XS from 10 or 12 years ago has only a maximum of 1600 ISO. Now, to see a camera being released in 2018 with a max of 6400 ISO at $1,000, I can't reconcile those two very well. I understand there are limitations, but that's a bit much in my opinion, especially with how small that sensor is. It's basically going to be like trying to shoot anything with your phone. Now, on the other hand, you are going to get a 3000 millimeter reach. So at 2600 millimeters, you can get full sensor captures of the moon. So you're not even at the full extension of the lens, which is fantastic. On the flip side, how often are you going to use that? Are you going to need a tripod because it's so heavy, because the reach is so long? You're going to need to put it on a timer. The lens quality, because there's so much glass, because there's so much for that light to move through. You're going to get sharp pictures? Probably not. On the RX10, it is a small sensor, by comparison to full frame, yes, but you're getting way more frames per second. You're getting way better low light performance than you're going to get on the P1000. Although it has a smaller lens reach, 24 to 600, that's 25x zoom as opposed to the 125x zoom of the Nikon, the rest of the camera is supported so much better. A camera is not just its lens. A camera is the full functionality, right? And so there might be people that are like, well, Nikon's menus are way better. And to that I say, use the My menu and the function menu and the customizable buttons, baby, because I never used my Sony menus because I just have all my custom stuff set up. Read the manual if you have to, or do what I do and throw it out. And then just build your custom settings exactly the way you want them and never have to use the menu again. That's the way that I like to do it. In terms of video capture, you're gonna get a lot more flexibility on the Sony. On the Nikon, you have video capture, but it's not, Nikon doesn't have a history of great video capability. They're not a video company. Sony has a broadcast company. Sony has a motion picture company. They make very high-end cinema lenses and cameras, or very high-end cinema cameras rather, not lenses. So you know you can trust their video output. So all in all, this is going to come down to a number of factors, right? What's your budget? What's important to you? So if your budget is $1,200, you can't get into the RX10 Mark IV. And in my opinion, it's not really worth it to try to get into the RX10 Mark III or Mark II or the Mark I. It might make more sense at that point to get into the P1000 if you can't stand the thought of a slightly lesser reach of an RX100 Mark VI or Mark V. I think those are both great cameras as well, but we're not here to talk about those. I think the P1000 is probably going to be a great camera, but it's also kind of in this weird limbo space of a little bit too little too late for Nikon, from Nikon. It needs to have a little bit more capability in some key areas like low light performance, like video, like, being able to take more frames per second for more frames. Some of those things really add up to make the RX10 a much more professional tool. I've spoken with people in the comment sections of my videos on the RX10 where they've either been or known personally like National Geographic photographers who only take out an RX10 into the field because they're in such dusty and cold, environmentally difficult situations that's the best camera for them. And that's a camera that they can rely upon to get the images that they need. I would very much doubt that there will be a photojournalist that's going to take a P1000 into the field because of its limitations. Its limitations are all that glass. You're not going to get a sharp image. The weight is going to be enormous once you start actually having to carry it around. The feature set is nice, but it's not up to the standard that it needs to be to reasonably challenge the Sony on its home turf, because this is its home turf. Sony makes excellent bridge cameras, excellent cameras with 1-inch type sensors. What Sony's done is they've said, we're not going to make cameras with smaller than 1-inch type sensors at that price point. And they've delivered some of the best sensor technology and architecture in the world. The sensor technology in the RX10 Mark IV is the same as in their $4,500 flagship camera. So when you're getting into that camera, you know that the autofocus also the same. The sensor architecture are going to be incredibly reliable in the most demanding situations. You don't know that with the Nikon, and that's going to be a point that, could be a big downside, not downfall, because downfall is misused constantly on the internet. Big downside, that's a real word, of the P1000. So if it were my money, I wouldn't buy either. I'd buy an interchangeable lens camera, so perhaps I'm not the best one to speak on the subject. But I think that if you are the right person for one of these cameras, consider very closely if you will want some of the features of the RX10 Mark IV in the next, 5 to 10 years. These are expensive cameras. You're going to want them to last. Even if it's just 2 to 3 years, are you going to, in a year and a half, in 2 years, say, wow, I wish I had a bigger buffer so I could take more images at once? Will you say, wow, I wish I had greater than 7 frames per second, which you can get on a $699 camera with a kit lens from Canon, who's notoriously not great about keeping up on specs like that. You know, I think that the P1000 isn't the best value for the money, despite that lens. That lens is a huge selling point, I get it. The lens isn't what makes the camera. The person behind the camera is what makes the camera. And the person behind the camera needs the camera to be a powerful enough tool to capture everything that they want to capture. And a 3000mm focal length lens is not going to be the most important tool in that camera's arsenal. Really good autofocus, really good sensor architecture, really good supporting features, IAF face detect for portraiture, for stills, great autofocus in video, great video functionality that is, right now anyway, industry standard. I think the RX10 Mark IV's got to take this one, at least in my book. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Thank you for liking and subscribing, or disliking if that's your bent. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next one.